Suppose you are just 1 year old, wholly helpless and unaware of the evil that will shatter your world. The person who loves you most, who smiles at you every morning, who holds you when you cry, is brutally taken away from you. That's what happened to Orlando Johnson when his mother, Vicki Renee Johnson, was senselessly murdered. Back then, Sabado Park was a tough place. There were gangs, drug addicts, and women getting hurt by their partners. But Vicki Johnson's murder was different. It was a wake-up call that showed just how bad things had gotten. She wasn't associated with gangs, and to be killed the way that she was, Seaside Police Chief Nick Borges recalled, highlighting the brutality of the crime. The pain and questions haunted Orlando as he grew up, fueling a desperate search for answers. 32 agonizing years later, the truth finally emerged, bringing a glimmer of closure to Orlando's broken heart. He's grateful for the resolution, but the scars of his mother's senseless murder will forever remain. But questions still remain. Why did police fail to catch the killer for 32 years? How did DNA solve the case? Who else knew the truth? What drove the killer to murder? Who were Joseph Dermontte Mitchell Jr. and Frank Lewis McClure? And what roles did they play in Vicky's tragic fate? In this video, we will reveal the shocking truth behind Vicki Renee Johnson's absurd murder and how her case got closure after 32 years old. Let's watch the full video to find the twists and turns of this heart-wrenching case. Before moving forward, show your support by liking and subscribing. It was a warm, sunny February 1956 with birds chirping and a gentle breeze rustling through the trees. On this idyllic day, a precious life was born, Vicki Renee Johnson. Her parents, Tommy and Ruth Jackson, welcomed their second child with open arms, surrounded by the love and support of their close-knit community. As Vicki grew up, she became a familiar face in the neighborhood. Her family was well respected, and their home was always filled with laughter and warmth. Vicki's siblings, her older brother and younger sister, adored her. The three of them were inseparable. Her dedication and passion marked Vicki's journey through Fairmount Junior High School for learning. She was the kind of student who always had her hand raised, eager to answer questions and participate in class discussions. Her classmates remembered her as a kind and gentle soul, always willing to lend a helping hand. "I went to school with Vicki," recalls Mark Jew Renee, a former classmate. "She was an amazing person, always smiling and friendly. We'd sit together at lunch, and she'd share stories about her family. She loved her parents and siblings so much, and it was clear that family meant everything to her." After graduating from junior high, Vicki continued to excel in high school. Her teachers praised her for her hard work and determination, and her classmates admired her kindness and empathy. As Vicki entered adulthood, she found her calling in helping others. She worked as a teaching aide at a local Seaside preschool, where she nurtured young minds and inspired a love of learning. Her patience, understanding, and creativity made her a beloved figure among the children and staff. But Vicki's greatest joy was her family. She was the mother of 3 children. Her love for them knew no bounds, and she dedicated herself to being the best mother possible. One of her children, Orlando, would become a famous basketball player, but to Vicki, this is still unknown. Those who knew Vicki described her as beautiful, inside and out. Her kindness, generosity, and love for life inspired all who crossed her path. Her family and friends cherished her, and her community respected her. But little did anyone know tragedy was near, and it would change everything. Vicki Johnson's life took a devastating turn in her final years due to a crippling crack addiction. The addiction slowly drained the life out of her, leaving behind a shadow of her former self. The Sabado Park was already a hub for gangs and drug use, but Vicki's death made everyone realize that the violence had gone too far. She was a woman who struggled with addiction and personal issues, just like many others in the park. Her murder was a tragic reminder that the cycle of violence and addiction can have devastating consequences. But photos of her still show the vibrant person she once was, a bright smile, radiant skin, and beautiful curls. These photos are a heartbreaking reminder of the contrast between her former life and the tragic way she died. They show a woman who was full of life and promise, but ultimately lost to addiction. The darkness of that fateful January 3rd, 1991 morning was shattered by a chilling phone call that would haunt the Seaside City Police Department forever. The voice on the other end whispered a gruesome secret. A woman's body, engulfed in flames, lay in a sandbox at Sabado Park on Darn Street in Edge Place. The officers rushed to the scene, their hearts racing with every step. As they approached the sandbox, the air grew thick with the pungent smell of smoke and burned flesh. The officers were met with a sight that would sear their souls forever. A woman's body, brutally ravaged by fire, lay motionless. The sand beneath her was stained with the remnants of her life. The silence was deafening, broken only by the soft crackling of the flames. The investigation revealed a story of unspeakable horror. The woman had endured a savage death, suffocated and strangled with such force that sand had been lodged deep within her throat. Bite marks scarred her body, proof of the perpetrator's unrestrained cruelty. Her clothes were torn and her upper torso burnt beyond recognition. The brutality was shocking, a harsh reminder of the evil that's out there. The Seaside police chief and his team scoured every inch of the crime scene, collecting evidence with meticulous care. They worked tirelessly, fueled by a burning desire for justice. Yet, despite their efforts, the killer remained elusive, leaving behind only the faintest whisper of their presence. The frustration was palpable, the sense of helplessness hanging in the air like a challenge. The body was transported to the coroner's office, where the victim was identified as 34-year-old Vicki Renee Johnson. Her family and friends were left to pick up the pieces, their lives forever shattered by the brutal loss. In a final act of defiance, Vicky had fought back against her killer, leaving behind a crucial piece of evidence, the perpetrator's DNA, lodged beneath her fingernails. The sample was carefully collected and stored. It was a beacon of hope in the quest for justice. It was a small victory, a glimmer of light in the darkness. The search for Vicky's killer had only just begun, a journey into the heart of darkness that would test the resolve of all who sought to bring them to justice. The police department worked tirelessly, following every lead, every hint, every whisper. They were driven by a burning desire for justice, a need to bring closure to Vicky's loved ones. The case remained unsolved as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months. The darkness that had descended upon Sabado Park that fateful night seemed to stay, a chilling reminder of the evil, and was waiting to strike. The people of Seaside City lived in fear, their lives forever changed by the brutal murder of Vicki Renee Johnson. When Vicky's brutal murder shook the neighborhood, the police were left with more questions than answers. They started by talking to her friends and family, trying to piece together the events of that fateful night. But as they spoke to Vicky's neighbors, they realized something was off. "We're used to the shootings in the area," said one neighbor, "but nothing like this. It's sickening to think that someone could be burned like that. It's just so unfortunate that something like this would happen." The police were baffled by the lack of witnesses. "Nobody called, no one saw this," said Police Chief Borges. "It's like everyone was too afraid to speak out, and that's when it hit them." The culture of fear that permeated the community was so strong that people were too afraid to come forward. As the investigation continued, the police found a glimmer of hope. A DNA sample had been collected from Vicky's fingernails, a crucial piece of evidence that could lead them to the killer. But as they dug deeper, they realized that the truth was far more complex and sinister. The community was trapped in a cycle of fear that had been building for years. It was a place where people lived in terror, where the sound of gunfire was a regular occurrence. And amid this fear, a killer had struck, leaving behind a trail of destruction and heartbreak. As the investigation into Vicky's murder continued, a name kept popping up: Joseph Dermontte Mitchell Jr. He was a known criminal with a history of violence, and the police had suspicions about his involvement in Vicky's case. But who was Joseph Mitchell really? A look into his past revealed a disturbing pattern of behavior. In 1988, he was sentenced to 4 years in prison for sexually assaulting a woman and brutally beating her handicapped mother. And yet, after his release from prison, Mitchell didn't seem to change his ways. He continued to assault women in the area, leaving a track of victims in his wake. The police had their suspicions, but they couldn't link him to Vicky's murder. As they dug deeper into Mitchell's past, they found a complex web of violence and deceit. His actions seemed to be driven by a deep-seated disregard for others, which was evident in his previous crimes. The police couldn't shake off the feeling that Mitchell was hiding something. His history of violence, combined with his suspicious behavior, made him a prime suspect in Vicky's murder. But despite their efforts, they couldn't find the evidence they needed to link him to the crime. The police knew they had to watch Mitchell closely, watch his every move, and wait for him to slip up. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, there was no clue of Mitchell. His disappearance only added to the unease that had settled over the community. Vicky's family and friends were left to wonder if they would ever find justice, if they would ever know the truth about her brutal murder. The investigation seemed to be going cold, and the police were no closer to catching her killer. But they refused to give up, driven by a fierce determination to bring Vicky's murderer to justice. The police were stuck. They had been waiting for a break in Vicky's case for what felt like forever, but every lead seemed to end in a dead end. The public's interest was decreasing, and the case was going cold. It was like Vicky's memory was slowly fading away. But then, something changed. In 2021, a team of investigators in the Seaside Police Department decided to take another look at the cold cases from 1991. Vicky's case was at the top of the list, and they were determined to solve it. They started by re-examining the DNA evidence collected from Vicky's nails. It's called the Combined DNA Index System, and it has DNA profiles of almost 16 million people who've committed crimes. Vicki Johnson, a mom of 3, fought back against her attacker with all her might. She managed to get some of his skin under her fingernails. Testing it was a long shot, but they hoped that new technology might reveal a new lead. They uploaded the DNA into a database and waited. And then, it happened. The database spat out a name, the name of Vicky's killer. The police couldn't believe it. After all these years, they finally had a lead. The police were determined to bring the killer to justice, to make sure that he paid for his crimes. They worked tirelessly, gathering evidence and building a case against him. Frank Lewis McClure, a man with a long and troubling history of violent crimes, was finally revealed as Vicki Johnson's killer after decades of evading justice. He was a man with a troubled history, and 46 years old when Vicki met her tragic end. However, in a shocking twist, police discovered that McClure had passed away in 2021 at the age of 77, taking his secrets to the grave. McClure's rap sheet was a laundry list of disturbing offenses. According to records from the Seaside Police Department, McClure had a string of arrests in 1990, including possession of drug paraphernalia, resisting police, and multiple assault charges. He was arrested again in 1991 for domestic violence and assault with a deadly weapon. Police Chief Nick Borges noted that while McClure's crimes were serious, they seemed to be personal and didn't appear to be connected to Vicki Johnson's murder. However, McClure's violent behavior continued, and he violated his probation in 1994, landing him in prison for 4 years. After his release, McClure was arrested twice more for domestic violence, in 1999 and 2011, before he died in 2021. Borges believes that a code of silence in the small town hindered the investigation and justice for murder victims. Detectives and police officers tried to gather information, But the code of silence prevailed, he said. The fact that McClure could evade detection for so long has left Police Chief Nick Borges boiling with anger. I think the fact that he remained in Seaside all those years demonstrates his level of confidence and arrogance that the case would never be solved, Borges said. I am outraged that McClure felt comfortable enough to not only stay in Seaside but continue to commit crime. How could someone with such a clear pattern of violence manage to hide in plain sight for so long? What's even more astonishing is that McClure's family was well respected in Seaside, and those who knew him never suspected he was capable of such a heinous crime. His ability to blend in and avoid detection has left police wondering how many other cases might still be unsolved. But as the police closed in on the killer, they couldn't help but wonder. How many other victims were out there? How many other families were waiting for justice? The case of Vicky's murder had opened up a Pandora's box, revealing a dark web of crime and deceit that went far beyond one individual. The truth is, there are still 32 unsolved murders in Seaside, and the possibility that McClure might have been responsible for more than just Vicky's death is a chilling prospect. Orlando Johnson has honored his mother's memory as he ascended the ranks of professional basketball to the NBA, despite the tragic circumstances of her murder when he was just a year old. Throughout his career, Johnson has used his social media platforms to pay tribute to Vicki Johnson. Standing at 6 feet 5 inches tall and 34 years old and the same age his mother was when she was killed, Johnson is currently in his 11th season of professional basketball. His career has taken him from UC Santa Barbara to the NBA, where he played for the Sacramento Kings, Indiana Pacers, Milwaukee Bucks, Phoenix Suns, and New Orleans Pelicans. Internationally, he has competed in China, Russia, Australia, Taiwan, Bosnia, and the Philippines, currently playing for Uruguay's club Atlético Aguada. Despite his success, Johnson's life began with profound adversity. 6 years after Orlando Johnson's mother passed away, tragedy struck again when a space heater in his childhood home sparked a fire that engulfed Christmas decorations. During this devastating event, Johnson was visiting his half-brother. The fire tragically claimed the lives of his great-grandmother, aunt, and 2 cousins, as reported by the Monterey County Weekly. Between 1989 and 1995, a total of 7 members of Johnson's close-knit family passed away. Among them was his grandmother, who had been his primary caregiver and who died due to a heart attack. Johnson used Instagram to share poignant tributes to his mother and grandmother on Mother's Day in 2019. Then, on his late mother's birthday in 2020, he posted photographs that police would later circulate to announce the identification of her killer. One particularly emotional image juxtaposed a smiling 1-year-old Johnson on his mother's lap with a recent photo taken at her gravesite. Accompanying the post was a heartfelt message. "Looking forward to having one of our heart-to-hearts and bringing you some flowers when I'm back. Your boys love and miss you. Your family always thinks about you and misses you." Seaside Police Chief Nick Borges, who was just 10 years old when Vicki Johnson was killed and grew up near where her body was discovered, expressed his honor in personally informing Johnson and his family of the breakthrough in the case. "They were very grateful," Borges conveyed in a news interview. "I could tell by speaking to them that this was very difficult to relive, and they are processing this magnitude." The relationship between McClure and Vicki Johnson remains a mystery. While police have found no concrete evidence linking the two, they do share a common thread. Despite their best efforts, police may never find McClure's motive for the brutal and senseless murder. Finally, after years of waiting, Vicki's family and friends would get the closure they deserved, and Vicki's memory could finally rest in peace. What do you think is the key to keeping hope alive for families waiting for justice in cold cases? Share your thoughts and let's discuss in the comments. Like, subscribe, and share this video to help us continue sharing powerful stories like this one.